The Demon's Rapture, Chapter 1. Raymond awoke. The hospital room was empty and dark. Too empty, too dark. It was daytime, he could tell from the lines of sunshine through the shades across his window. But something wasn't right about this sunshine. Something that made Raymond feel like it wasn't the sun at all. As if something was blocking it. Something that wasn't letting the sun do its job. He closed his eyes and shuffled through his last few memories, which felt something like dreams. He could remember the hospital, but why was he there? All he had to reference was the faded memory of his pickup truck, the steering wheel to be exact. He remembered gripping it tight as he braced himself for impact. He remembered how his teeth had rattled inside his head. Yes, the car accident. It could have been worse. It had left him with only a concussion and some tightness at his back. He was on his way out of town when a car slammed into him through a red light, operated by a driver whom Raymond was quite sure was already dead before the collision. He couldn't remember much from there, but he remembered why he was speeding out of town. That morning Jesus Christ had appeared before him in his dream, although it was the most realistic vision he'd ever had. In the dream, Raymond stood in his living room, which was empty. He somehow knew the entire house was empty and his wife and son were gone. As soon as he realized this, he screamed and ran out his door. On his doorstep stood the image of a glowing man of intense golden light, and its brightness was enough to blind Raymond momentarily. He never got a clear image of Christ's face through the sheen, but Raymond did feel an overwhelming wash of love that almost seemed to lull him into sleep. The Christ spread his arms and a scarlet light burned within his chest like a torch. A soothing male voice spoke to him, and Raymond could not tell if the mirage before him was even moving his lips. Still, he heard the message loud and clear, and even after processing it, after his carnal urge to scream and cry, the Christ gave him love. Laura and George have left this world, Raymond. You are here to contend with the opening of the seven seals, my revelation at the end of time and death, the voice told him without tone and without emotion. The rapture is here, and those you love and idolize have returned to my kingdom of heaven, now free from death. May you find my light to carry you home, but first you must die, and the dead will meet you. This is your last day. Until midnight of the second day, you will be judged. Before Raymond could plead for mercy, the Christ stepped backward into a curtain of light that swept him out of existence and Raymond out of his sleep. It was morning and Raymond woke up in bed, but Laura was missing from his side. His son George was gone as well, his bedroom door still closed. Laura's car was still in the garage and all her clothing was in place, leaving everything untouched from the day before. They were just gone, no note or dishes in the sink, only ruffled bed sheets. The phone was dead and there was no power in the house. Raymond could remember his dream, but his rational mind told him something horrible had happened to his family, never mind the vision. They were in the hospital, or something worse. Still dressed in his pajamas, Raymond hurried out of his house and into his truck. He set a course for the hospital, and that was precisely where he ended up, only in the back of the ambulance. He didn't make it far into town before the other driver blind swiped him into unconsciousness. Raymond got out of the hospital bed, pulling the plugs of oxygen from his nostrils. He went over to the window and felt a slight breeze as it fluttered across his lower back. He wore a white cotton hospital gown, open in the back. It was splattered with someone else's blood and had many red handprints on it. Come to think of it, there were bloody prints everywhere. Equipment was thrown aside, and a gurney lay broken and overturned in the corner. Blood dripped from the wall in frozen splatters. Raymond turned his attention back to the blinds and threw them open in one yank of his wrist. He was right. The sun wasn't shining. It was daylight and the sun wasn't out. Dark rain clouds filled the sky in a broad paintbrush stroke. Raymond couldn't even see the mountains. The streets were completely empty, not a person to be seen, but there were a lot of cars. Some cars were overturned and still smoking. Some cars protruded from the front of nearby buildings like spears. The road was torn apart, brick and rock lining the streets like decoration. The street was torn down the middle with a spiderweb crack. Buildings had collapsed into piles of brick and ash, blanketing the entire street in a winter storm. Where's the help? Raymond thought. If this bad of an accident happened, then where is everyone? Raymond left the window with tear-strewn eyes and walked toward the closed door. He opened it slowly and entered the ghost town of a lobby. The front desk down the hall was unmanned, and he couldn't hear the normal orchestra of a hospital, of squeaking shoes or the hiss of medical equipment. There were no souls around. Raymond stepped out of his room, the cold linoleum stinging his bare feet to the point of numbness. The rooms along the hall were closed up tight. Trash, body limbs, clothing, gurneys, and more buckets of blood splattered the lobby. The fluorescent lights above him flickered and died for a minute. They shot back on and flickered again. Raymond tried for one of the room's door handles and found it locked. He tried another, locked. Another, locked. He stepped carefully the other way, toward the reception desk and toward a pair of double doors. He peeked over the front desk and found nothing. Pencils and papers were scattered around the floor and desk. Blood stained the carpet, and he found a shotgun that looked to be loaded. He thought about taking it for protection when he spotted the phone on the desk, which had been torn from its cradle. Raymond grabbed the cordless phone and checked that its battery pack was still intact. Then he checked for a dial tone. Hello? Hello, this line is no longer in service. Hello, this line is no longer in service. A mechanical female voice repeated over and over again. Yeah, I think I get the point. Hello, this line is no longer in service. Raymond set the phone down on the desk. He didn't even bother to turn it off. Then he threw open the swinging double doors. The lights above him snuffed out like a candle and they didn't flicker back on. Raymond stopped abruptly, chest heaving, breath thinning. He stood silent in the stunned darkness and could hear the phone off in the background. But it wasn't the woman's recording he was hearing. It was the piercing ee that a phone makes after it hasn't been turned off. Raymond went through the open doors and caught some natural sunlight, seeping through the wall-length window in front of him. Wind whipped at him from the open window and he shivered in his robe. Then Raymond fell against the swinging doors with surprise. All around him were the dead bodies of men and women. Some lay half in and out of the open elevators, and some lay decapitated on the floor in front of him. Raymond realized that he had stepped onto a floor stained with flowing blood. There were bullet holes all along the walls and in the elevator doors. Please, God, don't let the lights come back on. I don't want to see those bodies in the light. Please, God, no. The lights above him rebooted, and the elevator doors immediately started to open and close on their own. The stench reached Raymond's nostrils, and he winced in displeasure. It was the smell of burning hair and strong chemicals. Raymond realized that it wasn't just from the lobby he stood in, but the horrible smell was on the air, wafting in through the window. Raymond stepped shakily over the dead and stood by the opening and closing elevator doors. He chose one with the least amount of bullet holes and nudged the body of a man away from the door with his toes. He got inside and let the doors close around him. There were no bodies in there, but it was rife with holes and blood. It smelled like spoiled eggs, and it reminded Raymond of a leaky basement. He punched the ground floor button and the elevator trembled vigorously. Then it began to move steadily down the elevator shaft. Raymond closed his eyes, hoping to God that the power didn't go out again. Ding! The elevator door swung open and Raymond fled from the metal tomb and into an identical lobby, complete with the same devastation. Raymond gave the elevator doors a hurried glance. They shut with a snap. The elevator began its ascent back up the shaft. Silence. It was too silent. Raymond found himself running in circles through the maze-like corridors and hallways, searching endlessly for the exit. Whenever he came to an intersection of hallways, he'd frantically pick a passageway into a new set of corridors. The first floor was even worse than the fifth. Raymond noticed a lot of ash and burnt rubble from some kind of explosion. He passed by a few windows that were set high up on the walls. There was no way he could climb through them, though the glass was blown out. Raymond turned left toward the front desk, where he knew he'd find the exit. He followed a long, winding corridor and into the ER waiting room. He burst outside and ran away from the building, pushing his way past the onslaught of overturned cars and piles of burnt rubble. From behind him, he heard the doors of the hospital close. He didn't look back. He couldn't. He ran to the other side of the street, across a surface hot enough to scorch his bare feet. The parking lot was full, so he took the precautions of moving low behind the cars to hide him from outside eyes. He took a moment to catch his breath and look back at the hospital. It was now bathed in the shadow of the dark clouds, and like a blanket that had been pulled over his head, he felt his world go silent, left only with the ringing in his ears. The light resembled the cool moonlight hours, even though the watch on his wrist told him it was 2:30 in the afternoon. As Raymond should have expected, the rain pelted down from the clouds. All the windows in the hospital were drawn shut with blinds. Some windows were blown inwards, but still had the blinds fluttering neatly in the cool breeze. Raymond didn't wait for the blinds to be pulled back to reveal the pale faces inside. He couldn't help but think of all the closed doors on the 5th floor and what might be behind them. He allowed the cold rain to wash over his sore face and soothe his feet. From the drops off his beard, Raymond drank the rainwater greedily and savored the weight of his stomach again. He found the exit to the parking lot and jogged down the street, where he knew he would meet with an intersection of the 4 major roads in town. When he reached the intersection, where the bodies of the dead and the rubble choked all sides of the road, he charted his next course. He hoped that his dream was accurate and his family had safely escaped the nightmare. Maybe it wasn't too late for him to get out either, but if that meant his death, he would fight it to his last breath. If he could keep fighting, he would do so, though he understood one thing. Before he could surrender to the apocalypse at midnight, whatever that might be, he would return home one last time and make sure Laura or George weren't there. They might have found a safe way back to the house to wait for him. Only then could he go in peace. He decided to take Broadway from there to find another way around. His feet splashed in the quickly forming puddles. Rain poured down his face and neck. If this rain keeps up, there's bound to be a flood, Raymond thought. The thunder roared in agreement over his head, and the clouds broke open in a joyous snarl. Chapter 2. Raymond stopped at a restaurant that sat at the end of Boulder Avenue. Its windows were smashed in, leaving jagged pieces of glass to stand upright in the frame like teeth. The glass was stained with blood from the fingers that had forced it open. Raymond had stopped at the restaurant to find someone alive to help him, and to duck temporarily out of the rain. The window in front of him was large, stretching from the sidewalk to the top of the diner. Raymond stepped easily through the window and inside. He teetered into the diner and spied through the darkness. The restaurant was in tatters. The tables were thrown to opposite corners of the room and were either snapped into splinters or smeared with blood. There weren't any bodies Raymond could see, and he counted himself blessed. But the stink was there, just as it had been in the hospital. He stepped and winced in a hot scorch of pain that twisted itself up his thigh and into his groin. He looked down and suppressed the urge to scream. His bare foot had just stepped into a litter of broken shards. Raymond lifted up his leg in a cartoon reflex and stumbled backward. He hobbled into a crouched position to catch his breath, and his other foot crunched down on the same bed of glass. He bounced away from the glass and the window, and still managed to press on with his tiptoes. He slid into a seat at one of the open booths, which was relatively clean, and lifted his leg to inspect his foot. The damage proved only minor cuts on the surface, and he took his time in using his thumb and forefinger to pry the rogue glass shards from his flesh. In a matter of minutes he was free of pain, and he applied pressure with his hands. He took a look at his other foot and was thankful he'd be okay. He breathed a sigh of relief to be out of the rain. Outside, the thunder boomed and rain pelted in through the open window. Raymond stared at the excess rainwater, splashing and trickling over the floor in a hypnotic gurgle. He looked at the table attached to the booth, which was scattered with empty pretzels, beer nuts, and napkins. One napkin was hammered into the wood with a nail, and someone had scrawled something in chicken scratch on the faded surface. The skies opened in a smile, and those eyes I can't forget tore through the clouds. I know there will be no military or disaster relief. This was no disease. This was hell on earth. This is the apocalypse. I'm a God-fearing man, and the Lord has forsaken me, left me to die while those I love are free. There were red eyes in the sky looking at us, studying us. Raymond stopped reading and hung his head in silent prayer, ending the task with a simple gesture of the cross with his arms. Raymond tore the napkin from the tabletop and went to the door of the diner. There was a small calendar nestled on a nail with pictures of cheerleaders, and he dropped the calendar from the door to hang the napkin in its place. Whenever help decided to come, they'd see the note, though he knew the chances didn't even exist. Raymond jumped as the rain turned to sleet with large hailstones the size of marbles. They clicked and splattered heavily on the roof, as if knocking to get in. Raymond backed up into the shadows of the restaurant beyond the dining area. The lightning outside peeled across the clouds, reflecting through the glass in a whirlwind of blue fire. The window moved up and down on the wall as the world was shaking, an earthquake to bring the building down on his head, but Raymond steadied himself against the wall and breathed. He cowered against the farthest corner of the restaurant, which he didn't even care was marked with someone else's blood. Then he felt a chill run up his calf. He looked down idly, his peripherals still fixed on the toothless window. Nothing is the same anymore. Oh God, everything is alive and you're on the cliff over hell. He was standing in blood. Blood that was still flowing. Blood trickled through his toes like stream water, leaving red streaks on his feet. Raymond squirmed helplessly in place before he heard a stifled moan from the other corner, beneath an upset table and chairs. A black hump stirred there, and it was writhing in a sick spasm, just like a dying animal. Raymond stepped out of the red puddle and edged against the wall to get a closer look at the dark mass. Out of the darkness, two headlights of red fluorescent shined across the ceiling and walls. A man convulsed furiously in the far corner, hands beating at the hardwood floor. The red eyes rotated in his head like moving mechanical pieces. The cords and strands in his neck bulged. His lips curled over like hot wax, his teeth exposed and red. His nails scratched away at the wood floor, leaving deep grooves like a cat's claws. Raymond did not want to watch it, yet he couldn't take his eyes off the show. He pasted his back against the wall, his spine arching into the wallpaper. His head reared away from the scene, mouth open, but his eyes fixed. The man started to screech hoarsely, fist pounding at the earth like a ravenous ape. His eyes bulged with glassy exteriors, and Raymond was sure they were going to pop right out of his head. His mouth spilled more blood onto the floor. Raymond watched the man change in front of him from a corpse and into a blinking and breathing monster who snorted like a bull. It seemed to be weak and half asleep, rolling fitfully in its slumber, though its eyes were wide open. Its mouth opened and closed over a pink tongue, and the blue lips met and peeled apart. The arms became steady at his sides and then lifeless. His legs hardened into rigid staffs, and his head fell over onto his shoulders. His eyes closed and didn't open again. The body looked so peaceful there for a second, but Raymond knew the thing wasn't dead. It breathed raggedly. It snorted and whined. Raymond remembered what the Christ had told him in his dream. The dead will meet me. Is that how it is now? Raymond asked himself. To be punished with a perpetual death, sleepwalking and slumbering in a hell on earth? And will that be my midnight, to come back as one of them? He wondered when the thing's eyes would open again. to assemble this horrid new world. When would it regain its feet and exercise life back into its paralyzed arms and legs? Raymond didn't want to find out. He slid away from the wall and considered the tangle of chairs and overturned tables to his right. He heard the man groan and drag his nails across the floor. Raymond shifted his body weight to his knees and hid low to the ground behind the wreckage, peeking through a crack. Suddenly the man's head came into view as he stood upright. Raymond didn't want to look at the man's face, but he found it inevitable. The pupils in the man's red eyes shrank back into a camera's zoom. Then the man's hands went up to each side of his neck, and with one swift blurred movement, he cracked his neck first left and then right. Then he smiled, revealing sharp teeth. Raymond's body broke out in goose flesh. The creature sniffed the air, nostrils flaring crazily. Raymond ducked his head, and when he dared to look again, the man was gone, already stepping outside the window. He heard the man's shoes crunch with the glass. Raymond got up as quickly as he could and poked his head out the window and into the rain. Raymond saw a figure emerge from the fog at the end of the street, walking toward the restaurant, and it was covered with black blood. It didn't even look at the shops on either side as it strode casually by with a fixed intensity. More figures passed through the fog. The rain had begun to let up, reduced to a light drizzle. All the monsters were headed the same way, the way Raymond needed to go. They were all moving deeper into town. A humming woman in her 30s passed the window, and Raymond pressed himself against the wall, out of sight. The woman's head tilted to the side as she passed, and Raymond saw her red eyes strain to their corners as she spotted him. But she neither gave any indication that she cared, nor that she knew he was there. She tilted her head back and walked on down the street. She knew I was here. She saw me out of the corner of her eyes. Why didn't she attack me? Raymond asked himself. The dead will meet you, he heard inside his head. He edged closer, careful not to step on any of the glass. He got a better look at his travelers and saw they were all walking the same speed. He saw a mother and her toddler walking side by side, giving no indication that they were related at all. Their clothes were in tatters, burned and stained. The fog swept out of the town like a hand through a screen of smoke. Raymond could see the entire street, and it was streaming with people, elbow to elbow in a death march. There were at least 200 in view and still more to come, rolling in like a tide of joggers in a marathon line, although they were all in a discernible hurry. These people were familiar to Raymond. These were Raymond's neighbors and friends, now lost in their own shell of a body. Raymond gasped as he watched his son's 12-year-old friend strut across the sidewalk on the other end of the street. He hissed to himself, hobbling on the mangled mess of a leg. Raymond watched astonished as the undead marched through the rain, headed west. Some were smiling, others talking to themselves in dreamlike murmurs. Their gaze remained fixed forever forward. New lightning blew up and burned out with bright white flashes. Raymond jumped as the awaited thunder boomed forth, but the dead were not disturbed. More lightning illuminated the sky. Another man passed by the window so close that Raymond got a whiff of his rotting skin. He backed away from the window and made sure that he had good leeway to the back door if a problem should arise. Raymond tiptoed to the back door, hoping for an alleyway he could escape through. The door was unlocked and Raymond fell against it, revealing a loaded dock with a few dumpsters and a chain-link fence. He stepped into an ice-cold rain puddle and drew back suddenly. It felt quite cooling after the initial shock. He stepped again onto the gravel. Raymond took a deep breath and allowed the rain to wash over him, pasting his gown to his skin in an airtight seal. Raymond shuddered from the cold and wrapped his arms close to his chest to keep warm. In this way, he chose the straightest route home, through the litter-strewn streets and the alleys washed with blood. Even though he had to dodge from one alleyway to the other across a street corner or through an intersection, he remained alone. The flood of dead men and women had quickly vacated the streets, and Raymond hoped to do the same.